Okay friends, to get started on our job, the first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheels are off the ground. After that, you should have a splash shield that comes across the front. You're going to want to remove that. Ours is missing, so we don't have one to remove. Aside from that, we have a nice clear view of where we're going to start. Now if you come on the back side of the frame along here, you're going to be able to find where your idler arm connects onto this arm right here. We need to remove this cotter pin and then remove the nut. Now I'm just going to give this a couple loving bonks to break it free. With that broken free, the next thing we need to do is start removing our mounting nuts. You have one here and then two on the other side. The bolts for those are going to be located inside the holes on the opposite side of the frame. I'm just going to put my socket with my extension right through this hole onto the bolt, and then I'll take my wrench onto the nut. Now we can use our gun, or whatever you got, and remove the bolt. Now we'll just do the same to the other two. Now we're just going to separate this from the frame. All right, now we can grab this unit and get it out of here. Okay, now we can separate these two. Now that we have this out of the truck, something that I like to mention is it's a good idea to just go ahead and replace these as a pair. So if you buy one, just get the other one at the same time. In case you hadn't, the next thing I'm going to do is remove this nut right here, and then we're going to have to separate the two. The problem with separating these though is you could potentially damage the boot, or of course even the joint. That's why I recommend doing it as a pair. With all that said, let's remove this nut and start separating the two. Now ours was fairly recently replaced, so it just kind of separated on its own. That's not typically the case. Generally what you're going to have to do is use a pickle fork, get right in between, and give it a couple loving bonks to separate it. Or even if you have it up on wood like this, a bonk like that, generally the vibration will break it free. Okay friends, now it's going to be time to install our brand new idler arm. Now let's get our pieces together. When we do this, we want to ensure that this is going to be facing in the same direction. So you have your studs both facing towards me, essentially. Now, of course, you're going to replace it with brand new nut. Put on that new nut right there. Now we need to tighten this up. If you look at the inside here, you're going to tell that there's an area that you can hold onto. That's going to hold the stud that goes through here so it doesn't move. Then we're going to tighten up the nut. Okay, now that I have that nice and tight, get this out of here. Now we're going to torque this to 46 foot-pounds. Let's use a little bit of red thread locker on all of our bolts. Let's get this back up and into the truck. When we do this, we want to try to line up all three of our bolt holes with our bolts. Also, you have the stud that needs to go through the rod that's on the other side of the frame. Get this up into its area. I'm going to start that stud into its rod where it belongs. Just rest that in there. That's going to hold the assembly for us. And now we can try to hold onto those bolts and start them in. With all the bolts inside the assembly, let's continue on to putting on our washer. And then of course our mounting nut. We'll do the same to all three. With all of them started, let's continue on by snugging them up, and then we'll torque them to 73 foot-pounds. Let's get the bar up on here. Okay, now let's start our nut on. Now let's bottom this out. Now let's torque this to 40 foot-pounds. The next thing you want to pay attention to is the area on your stud that has a little hole on it. That's going to be for the cotter pin or the locking pin. You want to ensure that one of your slots is lined up with it. If it isn't lined up, just continue tightening until the very next slot does. Now let's get our locking cotter pin in there. Make sure that you pin it over so there's no way that it can fall out of there. Now all we have left to do is go ahead and put our shield back on, assuming you have it. Aside from that, take it for a road test down to your local alignment shop.